Hello, crypto boys and ghouls, and welcome back to the channel, Tales from the Cryptmancer, where we feature content on play and earn games on the blockchain, such as Splinterlands. And in today's video, I wanted to come out of Splinterlands content hibernation and talk about a way that we can add value back to card assets in Splinterlands and add some spice back into the modern league specifically for battles for human players. And I think you're going to want to listen to this idea. And shout out to both Aftersound and Jason Jenkins. Basically, I had commented on Aftersound's recent video where he was talking about renting all his cards with just a general comment here, which you can see on the screen, which I'm going to make a second Splinterlands video on that topic. Stay tuned for that. But I really want to call your attention to what Jason Jenkins had replied here to my comments. And I think this is a really great idea, and I think it has some legs here, and I think it should be potentially considered. And what Jason had mentioned is he didn't see why they don't rotate an old set back into modern so the card values don't get destroyed. And this is such a simple yet powerful idea. And shout out to Jason for having this idea. And I just wanted to share this idea. Again, it's not my idea, this is Jason's, but I think it's very powerful because I think this can indeed add value back to card assets within Splinterlands, specifically wild card assets. Now, here's why this is important. If you add value back into wild card assets, which is untamed dice, alphas, betas, etc., promos and orbs and stuff like that, what does that do? Well, it increases the rental market prices, which is good for asset values. It also makes land choices harder. If now there's meta cards that you want to use in your playing deck that you have on land, well, now you have to pull that off of land and make a hard choice on what you stake on land, and maybe you go and buy some reward cards to make up for those cards you pull off of land and put back in your playing deck. Now, going back to what this would look like, it's a very simple adjustment, really. It's basically what Jason is saying is, imagine this. Imagine on a weekly basis, the modern format had a random card set that was eligible to be played in modern every week. For example, let's say next week on Monday or Tuesday's maintenance, whatever it happens to be for the weekly period, all of a sudden Untamed set was usable in modern for the next week. What would that do? Just don't think about how it would be done from a coding perspective. Just think about what you would do as a player if this were to happen as a snap of the fingers. Dev team put this out there, and boom, on Tuesday after maintenance, Untamed was back in modern to be playable for a week. Well, all of a sudden, you could use Jodin again. You could use Kitty. What would that mean for combinations? All the bots would be all screwed up. The battle helpers would be all messed up. So all the cheaters out there still using those things, oh, they're screwed at that point. All of a sudden, you're bringing Llama back in with, Grim Bardoon or, Rage or whatever, right? You have a whole bunch of new metas, a whole bunch of new stuff happening in battles. Battles are interesting. They're fun again. And all of a sudden, Jodin's not selling for $38 on the market. Kitty's not selling for $77 because they can be used in modern to earn SPS. People on the leaderboards at the top levels of the game may want to rent those cards out if they don't own those cards. Rental markets increase in value. Again, what you see is a catalyst of value added into the game that doesn't exist there today, especially in modern, right? So this is, in my mind, a good thing for a couple of reasons. One, it adds card asset value back into cards like Untamed, Dice, Betas, and Alphas, because every week it'll be a new set on a rotating basis. Alphas could be the set, in 2 weeks that come into play. You want to keep playing and earning at the top of the modern league in Splinterlands at the champion level, we're going to need to rent some alpha cards. Well, all those cards are on land. Well, guess what? People are going to have to pay to get to those spicy SPS rewards in modern if they really want to make sure their win percentages are high, or they can try and battle it out without using those cards. But those that use those cards, either rent those cards or pull those cards off land or just own those cards, are going to do better for that week period of time for 7 days. Again, it adds value back to those cards, so they're not completely useless in the minds of most players. Card assets come up in value. Again, hard choices are made on land versus playing decks. It creates scarcity in the assets. Rental market prices go up, and new metas can be discovered when you bring in like dice set with the current modern set for a 7-day period. And maybe you have a cooldown period where on a random week, it's just no cards for a week are added other than the modern cards. So it gives some spontaneity, it gives some randomness, and it gives something for you as a player every week to come back into the game and see what's going on. Maybe you don't have any untamed cards and you don't want to rent cards. Okay, well, you could, then switch to wild for that week, or, bot or whatever. It adds some spice to the mix. And sure, people will say, well, that kind of defeats the purpose of modern, where you just have, the current rule sets. Well, guess what? The current state of the game is not good. This is something that can add some fun back into the game, can add some card asset value back into the game. And let's face it, fun and value is been scarce and far between currently in Splinterlands. So trying this out, there's nothing to lose. Now, certainly some people will pull out the pick axes and the salt mining equipment and say, look, Tails, you're crazy. The whole point of modern is just to use Chaos Legion or Rebellion cards. Let me use my cards here and leave me alone. That's fine, but what have we got to lose? The only thing we have to lose is players in modern, which they're very few. Let's say there's, I don't know, less than 500 players in modern right now. Well, those 500 players may be getting less earnings because wild players come back to the game and start playing and start competing in modern for that week period. Let's say when beta comes back for that week. Well, you know what? I'm okay with that. As a player that doesn't have beta or alpha cards, I mean, sure, I'll get less earnings, but I don't really care, because if all the game's assets, from card values to rental values to DEC back at peg to SPS having more value, if all of that from a broader ecosystem comes into play and uplifts Splinterlands because of this change, and more people come to modern and start playing because of the metas and the different tactics and strategies that can be used when different card sets are introduced here, I'm all for it. Go ahead, give me less earnings. I'm okay with it, because overall the game is going to be a better, funner, and more, I would say, I wouldn't say profitable, but a more positive game environment with this change. But I get it. I mean, if this is not what we want to do with modern, because modern is supposed to be for the last 2 current editions of sets for the latest investors, that's fine as well. We can still add value back to card assets if we don't rotate cards into modern. And how would we do that? We've talked about this before in videos that I've done on this channel. It's been also brought up in the community multiple times. It's simply, let's adjust the league formats within Splinterlands. If we don't want to add dynamic rotation of card sets into modern, well, here's how we can add value back to card assets. You keep modern as it is today. You keep wild as it is today. You just add a 3rd league. We've called it in the past videos that we've done a vintage league, where basically you have a 3rd league of vintage league. It's basically the same as wild is today, except it's human only. And as such, the modern league split for rewards is 40% of the SPS pool. The vintage league is 40% of the SPS pool. Those, both modern and vintage, are human only from a terms of service perspective. Only humans can play there. And the wild league for botting is the wild league as it exists today, except its reward pool is 20%. So you have 80% of the rewards in the ecosystem from SPS going to human players, and they can choose to play in modern or wild depending on their card set, and bots can still farm in wild as they do today, just with less rewards. And if anyone's going to shed a crocodile tear over bot and bot farms earning less SPS, well, cry away, as the case may be. But I think, again, if you add value back to human players using real assets with a dedicated pool, because I don't think people realize this. The number of human players that exist in the game that are actively playing right now are very few. If those very few human players can now capitalize on 80% of the rewards, either by choosing to play in modern or vintage, rewards go up for those players, asset values go up for those players, and players that are playing the game and owning or renting assets are getting the value of that play time, that investment of time, those investments of assets, goes back into the cards, goes back into the rental market. Things get rebalanced to where they should be, where from a play and earn game perspective, the players of the game get the benefits for playing the game. And as such, value is driven back into the ecosystem by those players because they're getting that value from a play and earn perspective. It's not just going to extractors that are running bots, dumping SPS on the market daily. And that's honestly what's happening in a lot of cases. That's why you can continue to see downward pressure on SPS. That's a whole nother topic. We've gone into it before. We can go into it again. The charts don't lie. The trends don't lie. If the only thing you earn in the game from an earning perspective is SPS, there's going to be consistent sell pressure and dumping on that token. And we've seen it for the last 2+ years. But let's fix one problem at a time. The idea of this video is to add value back to card assets. We've talked about 2 ways we could do that. One, through adjusting Modern League to have rotational card sets back into Modern to add value back to assets, or we talked about adding the Vintage League and rebalancing the SPS reward pools. Just to close off on the idea of rotational card sets back into Modern, I put this idea forth here, courtesy of Jason Jenkins. Is this idea where we would, in this case, rotate out in a fixed period of time certain card sets back into Modern to allow those to be played in a rotational basis, on a random basis, whether that's for 1 week, whether that's for 1 day, whether that's for 1 month. I mean, put a DAO proposal out there and let's see what makes sense. I would suggest that 1 week would be sufficient to add value to those cards on a recurring basis, so they're not just dumpster fire pennies on the dollar type values in the card market. People would scoop those up, people would see value in those, people would make land decisions. You get the picture. I think this would be an interesting way to add fun back into the game, using all these dual tactics and element summoners with wild cards in the Modern format from time to time. Again, we're talking about, let's just go here, like here's, Untamed 1 week. Well, the next week, all of a sudden, boom, Dice summoners are available. You can use Lorna and Mylor and Brighton in Modern. What would that do for the gameplay? What would that do for the meta? It would definitely make things interesting, for sure. I think for Modern players, yeah, is it still Modern if we introduce beta cards and beta summoners into the league for a 7-day period? No, it's not. But I tell you what, it's probably going to be funner and it's going to add value to these assets. That's enough for now. I'll let you think about it. Add your comments here in the video description below. Let me know what you think. Is this a way to add both value back to card assets in Splinterlands and a bit of fun? Or does this totally make everyone upset and back to the salt mines we go? Let me know in the comments below. And until next time, keep stacking those stats.
That's entertainment.